to a brand new live stream. So, back. Alright, let's see if I can get to chat. Here we go. Always takes me a few seconds to really get things underway. All right. Haha. So, we shall resume the game. God, I love this game. Anyway, today we talk about basically a book series that I haven't read in a while because the entire author has become insane, and that's fun. Whee! I know. So, there's lots to really unpack when it comes to that book series as a whole. The author herself, as brilliant as she was, really dropped the ball on several plot points. So this will be going into some spoiler territory. God, I hate this part. Hurry up. So, there are a lot of interesting concepts in the book series in general that I feel like never get really explored because J.K. Rowling is talentless in some regards. Like, and there are better people who've gone into like academic essays worth of stuff over it, which personally for me is they're pretty smart, but there are a few things like why didn't J.K. Rowling just make it so like we could acknowledge that Dumbledore was kind of a jerk? Like, don't get me wrong, Dumbledore had like a lot of good points and good things in general, but he was still kind of a jerk. He was willing to leave Harry with the Dursleys. He was willing to make He was willing to leave Harry with like these people who were awful, and even though it was proven time and time again that the Dursleys were awful people, Harry never got away from their house. Which I mean is pretty sad, and he never got away. And it would be nice if it was more like explored, saying, you know, they might be family, but you know, even if at the end of the message was saying, hey, you know, because most of other stories have like this found family. Family is what you make of it. Which I think would have made a much better, like, even that cliche of a message would have been better than what we got, for the most part. And it's not like J.K. Rowling is completely talentless, but at the same time, she doesn't seem... Hi, welcome! Thank you for stopping by. It's not like J.K. Rowling is the worst writer, but she really dropped the ball on, like, a ton of things. Like, I'm amazed she's a transphobe when she has, I'm somewhat amazed. When she has Nymphadora, who's a metamorphose, and I feel like had she not been so stubborn, that would have been a really interesting point to look at. Tonks being a character who can change her appearance at will, so she has this different view on how she appears to others because of this. And because she doesn't have a set view, she really doesn't know how to view herself according to others. How she sees herself is so vastly different than how others see her, because she can switch over to whatever she wants to look like. And there's like so many. That's the one thing about J.K. Rowling that I just can't stand, is that she has a ton of ideas. These things could be explored so well, and yet she doesn't. She never really explores beyond the juvenile good versus evil. Like, it's easy to, for example, it would be interesting to see a Muggle-born in Slytherin. I think that would be interesting. Or even just someone who wasn't a pureblood in Slytherin, because that's the way their personality was. And it would be interesting to have some of the purebloods really have this disconnect between them being blood supremacists, saying, hey, I'm better, but then all of a sudden they know they have a friend in their own house who is not necessarily, who just isn't a pureblood. And so they have to understand, they have to really come to terms with the fact that their best friend is just not really liked. That to me would be interesting. Make the characters more dimensional. But she never did, because reasons. I don't know why. I guess she just really couldn't think outside the box when it comes down to it. Okay. I completely forgot the controls for a second. Okay. And there are a lot of concepts that I feel like could have worked better in the grand scheme of things if she knew what she was doing. Because it is funny how much planning has gone into the books in general. Like, we see, gosh, I can't remember what book it is, but there is one book where Harry gets in trouble with Filch, and Peeves is convinced by, oh my gosh, it's been years, but Peeves is convinced by nearly headless Nick that it would be a good idea to drop this really expensive looking thing. It's like this wardrobe looking thing, and he convinces Peeves to drop it over the office to get Filch's attention, and it turns out to be a thing later on in the book series as a whole. So, like, these are more small plot points that they seem inconsequential in the short term, but they really do add more depth to the series. But then we have moments where it's like, okay, this looks like it's really good world building. It has this really interesting concept, and then nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happens of it. We don't see the consequences of these actions, which is disappointing because it would make a much more interesting story. But we don't. We don't get these interesting moral dilemmas, such as, well, what if Harry just stopped getting, like what if Harry had just a moment of questioning whether Dumbledore really meant well? Like, Harry's unwavering loyalty to Dumbledore just seems strange considering everything he's gone through. And it's never explored well enough. It's kind of like, you know, what's Dumbledore done, and everybody else is kind of like, well, Dumbledore's wise and old, and it's, why won't anybody else acknowledge it? Like, nobody else acknowledges that maybe Dumbledore just is considered all wise and powerful, and they didn't really stop to consider maybe, like, it might seem intelligent to him at the time, but it's, like, really, really stupid. We don't get too many moments of that in the books. And if it does show up, most people are not even really that angry. It's kind of like, oh, well, this is mildly inconvenient, not, hey, what you're doing is completely immoral, and I don't understand why this is happening. Ah. So, yeah. What else? I think it would have been interesting to really, to have a prequel, like, because even the prequels are, I haven't seen them because, frankly, I don't want to, but I think it would have been more interesting if there were ways to explore, I think it would have been really interesting had J.K. Rowling not just gone off the deep end and explored gender identity in the Harry Potter universe, because what's funny is that, like, or at least even gender expression, like, okay, fine, we don't have to go into whether trans people exist or not, but it's established that wizarding kind wear unusual clothing. They wear robes, which to the untrained eye would probably look like a bunch of men wearing dresses. And so it would be interesting to see, like, what is considered feminine clothing, what is considered masculine clothing, like, what is their relationship with how one's person gender affects the way they really behave and dress in the wizarding world, which isn't really explored upon. Which I understand, because you have, like, this kid who, like, they have skirts and whatnot, and I understand this is a kid. He's not really going to be paying attention about, like, the deep implications of whether or not he's wearing a skirt or trousers or whatever. But it would just be an interesting thing for later on. Like, they show the differences between America and Europe, but it would be fascinating to show what the wizarding world thinks about more complicated subjects. Because, but then again, I'm more of a in-depth thinker. I love the idea of really exploring these complicated, nuanced subjects. And J.K. Rowling nearly gets into it. And there are ways that she could have saved the book. So, So in year 4, Hermione goes off on a tirade saying that the house elves need to be freed, and it's viewed as well-minded but wrong. Well-minded but wrong, and that's kind of insane. Like, it would be interesting if, and there was a way to save it, in my opinion. There would have been a really good way to have really done that, and it's not that they necessarily don't want to be free. It's just that it could have been explained better, like, have someone say, look, these guys can't get a job anywhere else. It's illegal to hire them. Dumbledore giving them an allowance is considered to be extremely generous and just barely tipping over the point of legality. It's barely legal what he's doing, and so he's already defying the government when it comes to that. So we can't really let them be fired, because where else would they go? There's not too many other places that would give them this kind of benefit. Because she's trying to free them, she's giving them them clothing, which is basically insulting to their culture, and it's like, by trying to be an activist, you're not listening to the people. And I feel like that would be an interesting concept to teach. Hey, I know you mean good, but you're kind of doing the same thing by just really dismissing the advanced culture of these people and not listening to what they are trying to preserve. They have their own culture, and you're not listening. You're assuming, because of your own culture, what they mean. And that matters in the grand scheme of things. This is what a lot of people who are missionaries, who visited poorer countries would do. They would just go in and they would override the people's culture and what they were doing in general. So it would be interesting, but she's not as good at metaphors. There's something she's good at, and doing deeper adult content that really gets you thinking is not one of them. Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise. Like, we really don't, we see Ireland, but we don't really get much information about it. Like, I would be so interested in finding out what the Irish think. Like, the Irish Wizarding World thinks about the IRA, but then again, she's British, so it probably wouldn't be exactly the greatest idea. Though that would be an interesting take. I would pay good money to find out, like, to have someone, like, who is Irish, like, and who especially grew up around the 90s, and, like, or at least know someone who was in the, who was dealing with the IRA and whatnot, and their opinion on what the North Ireland and Ireland debacle is for the Wizarding World. That'd be interesting, because I know there's a lot of nuanced takes in the real world about whether or not Ireland should be one country, or if England should have North Ireland, and that is an interesting subject in of itself, and it would be interesting to see that kind of perspective in the Wizarding World. Like, what would they say? Would they, like, it would be interesting to see, Finnegan be, like, talking about that. And I know that this is kind of, like, a big ask. It's kind of really difficult because she is from England, and it would be weird if she was like, yeah, I'm gonna write a book from the perspective of the people that we basically screwed over. We screwed them over, and I'm just gonna write a book from their perspective. Especially since she was alive when the IRA was, well, when the 90s IRA was a thing. Especially then. I know it's still around, but still, the 90s, I want to make this somewhat of a distinction. And I'm not as educated, so I'm more of that would be an interesting concept. To have more Irish students really express, like, what they think. Or even just have, like, some, like, children who are Irish, and or even, like, Irish or Scottish, and it's, like, references to, like, traditional Irish and Scottish magic. Because I know they believed in magic, and so, because every culture in some point in time will have some form of magic that is just a universal thing. And how the magic differs is in the way it's used. So every country on Earth, every continent has some form of magic. So obviously the Celts had some form of magic, and it would just be interesting to see, like, a perspective. I want someone who's Irish, who knows Irish magic, really talk about, like have, like, write a book from the perspective of an Irish student who goes in and basically has to learn British magic, because the Brits and Ireland have two different views. Or even just have, like, one kid, like, acknowledge, hey, you know, I know purebloods are very bitter against Muggleborns, but the Irish are kind of bitter against the purebloods from England, because they kind of came in and told us what to do. Like, our magic was not considered to be legitimate because it wasn't English. It wasn't British enough. We had to be British and Welsh and all that good stuff. That would be an interesting conversation. There are a lot of things that would make a much more interesting book. Like, disabled wizards. Like, oh my gosh, if J.K. Rowling was as great of a writer as people think she is, the amount of books she could do, and which would actually be pretty, like, popular. It would be really popular to have, like, a book series about a disabled witch or wizard going into Hogwarts and really how they manage. Because there are a lot of interesting plots you can get from that. There are a lot of interesting stories that you can write from the Harry Potter universe that really can flesh out the world building and how it's functioning on a day-to-day way. What students have a slight advantage when it comes to magic. I want to know, like, how would a nonverbal student learn to do magic if they can't even vocally speak? They can't speak, so they are stuck trying to learn nonverbal magic when they don't even know standard magic. That would be an interesting concept. Like, how would that work? Would they be theoretically weaker or more powerful than their peers because they've had to learn a more complicated form of magic from a young age? They had to know how to do, like, a bunch of other stuff that most students wouldn't learn until they were in their 6th year. Because Harry doesn't learn how to use magical spells and whatnot until, like, nonverbal spells until he's in his 6th year. Which I find pretty interesting. Or, like, how would deaf students work? There's so many things that I feel like if J.K. Rowling was interested in really developing and really adding to it, she would make a boatload of money. Like, even more than she's already doing so. Like, she wants to get she wants the rewards of being considered a progressive. And it wouldn't be that difficult to actually be progressive and write a story and think about it. Like, if she's willing to, I think it was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child was a book that she had ghost written. She didn't even write the book herself. It was someone else who wrote it. So I think if she had, like, even just, like, a disabled author, like, write their own sort of theory on what students would do, giving her that permission, getting permission from J.K. Rowling to write, like, a novel from the point of view of a deaf character or a disabled character, that would make the story really, really interesting in general. Oh, there we go. How am I not dead? Besides, I mean, I know it's technically her book, so she can do whatever she wants. It's her book series. And so I really can't fault her for doing what she wants, but at the same time, I can say there are better means to an end. There are better ways of making a book that doesn't suck. And there are better ways to add on to the book series as a whole. And also, I'm just really, really sick and tired of... There's always been... It's not even plot holes. It's more of just it's more of, like, bad plot moments. Like, okay, I understand that this is logical. Like, there are moments where it's, yes, I know it's logical. This can actually, like, given the rules of the universe, it can happen, but it's still so dumb. Like, why hire Gilderoy Lockhart when we know he's a shitty teacher? Why do all this thing? I mean, we know the real reasons behind it, but it still doesn't make it any less dumb. Just because you have an explanation that removes it being a plot hole does not mean that it's not a dumb plot point. And in a way, I'm really glad that J.K. Rowling turned out to be a bigot. I'm so glad, because now that people have the rose-colored glasses off their eyes, you can now really step back and evaluate the book series as a whole. Is it a good book series? And while you can at least say, hey, these are the flaws. It used to be that you were if you were a Harry Potter fan and you criticized J.K. Rowling for anything, you were practically crucified because of it. Like, I remember, like, not feeling comfortable expressing my, like, I say this out of love. I don't say this out of a hatred of the book series, but now I say it out of a hatred of J.K. Rowling, but that's beside the point. I never said it out of a place of hatred for the books, but there was always this, hey, I love this book series, and this is how I feel like it could have been better. And many fans just didn't want to acknowledge that there might be some problematic stuff with the books. Like, just in general. Because I started reading shortly after the book series really, the movies really took off. I couldn't stop, I was around 11 when I started reading the books, and I read, like, all of them really quickly. I think Order of the Phoenix had just come out. It would have been physically impossible for me to have read the book since the beginning, because I was born in 94, and the books came out in 97 or 98. So I would have been a young toddler. I couldn't even read at the time the books came out. Like, oh my gosh, what was it? 97, 90, 94, 95, 96, 97. Yeah, I was like 3-4 years old when it came out. So I couldn't have started reading the books when when it was like, hello, these books are brand new. Would you like to read them? And it's like, what? Too young. Too young. So there's like a lot of saving things and whatnot. And what's funny is, like, as much as I love the characters, it's just so weird that like, they never really seem to change that much in the grand scheme of things. Like, it would be nice to see more, more concepts explored from, like, Harry and whatnot. But unfortunately, when we did get more adult things, the fans kind of freaked out. To this day, my favorite book will always be Goblet of Fire. I think it's really accurate to real life. Like, it's a lot more accurate than other books, because you have, like, a teenage Harry who's already going through a lot of shit, and then on top of that, he's not getting any sort of attention that he needs, like, in general. So, like, this is the equivalent of, like, a child being so close to their parents, and all of a sudden their parents are like, bye. Bye. And the kid's like, what? I know you're around, you're just not talking to me. That'd be pretty harmful. When I pretty, I mean extremely. For anyone's sake, for anyone's development. Because in general, though, that 5th book was, like, it was, what's the word? No, it was Murphy's Law. I feel like the 5th book was Murphy's Law. Whatever can go wrong will. Because everything really did go wrong in Harry's 5th year. Like, other than, like, the 4th year. Though that probably could sum up Harry's entire life. Murphy's Law. That'd be hilarious. Call him Murphy. Though that might be too on the nose. Hello, my name is Murphy. My name is Murphy. Murphy's Law. Hello, Mr. Law. Because, I mean, I know it would be way too on the nose, but that would be hilarious. What's funny is, like, as much as... And I've always had an issue with certain characters. Like Molly Weasley. Molly Weasley has been a giant pain. It's funny because at one point, it's mostly with Ron that we get it. It's kind of like she forgets that he doesn't like maroon. She forgets that he's not a big fan of roast beef. Like, this is the one time where you should be able to splurge. Like, because when Ron meets Harry, he's like, oh, I got roast beef. I don't like it. And isn't, like, your kid's first train ride to school should be, like, the best? I mean, it just seems kind of ludicrous that... Yeah, he's like, I don't like maroon, I don't like, basically, roast beef, or 95% of anything. So... you have this situation where he's kind of just stuck. And I get it. Molly Weasley, lovely woman. Could be a better mom, though. Could be a much better mom. That. Wait. So, thank you for watching, and I go live every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. My Patreon is in the link below, and for those on Twitch, my YouTube channel is available, so you can watch these streams on my YouTube channel. If you subscribe to my Patreon, you get these videos a few days early. Thank you for watching, have a good day, and bye!